everybody. Hopefully we got some more folks coming in. When you walked in the door this morning, you were supposed to pick up one of these that are next to our stack of bulletins. It's got a whole bunch of information on it. And so David Dickey is going right now to grab some more that he can. Yeah, I asked him ahead of time. So he's going to grab some more for you. We might create a log jam at the doors while some of y'all are going back to get one. We're going to go ahead and jump into class this morning because Brandon and I have a lot of information to share, and we're limited in our time, and so we want to make sure that we at least make an effort to give as much time to this as possible. Glad you guys came. I really hope we got a few more folks heading in after they drop off their kids and get their cups of coffee and all that kind of stuff. So if you haven't been a part of our church family for a while, you may not know we started this format for a class about a year and a half ago, and we call it our Insights class. And it's when we get together with our whole church family and try to dive deeper into some into the Word, into what Scripture is teaching us about some different topics, and maybe some things that we haven't either fully understood before, been confused about, heard other people's opinions about that may not have been completely accurate, and really trying to get some clear insight from Scripture for ourselves about those different topics. So, like I say, a year and a half ago, we walked through what Scripture talks about women and their role in the church. I think last summer, we were talking about just how important names are as far as naming your church and how important or unimportant that is. And so for this class, this may seem like a little bit of a left turn, I guess, in a way, but it really, our opinion is it really kind of fits into the concept of really trying to gain some clear insights, getting some deeper understanding of this particular topic, which is about sharing Jesus. Now, that is one of the things that obviously is supposed to be part of our mission, right? I mean, what's the mission here at Flagstone Church? Reach out, connect, and serve. Okay?
I didn't see enough hand motions.
I didn't see any, but that's all right.
Thinking the same way.
It's early in the morning, so there you go. Lisa got it. Thank you, Lindsay.
Excuses.
That's but that's not just a tagline. That's something that we truly want to do. Now, part of the question is, who is it that we are reaching out to and connecting with and serving? Part of that group is our church family. We're needing to reach out to each other and connect with each other. Part of that is connecting with God. We want to reach out to Him when we need to. We want to be able to serve Him and serve each other. But a major focus of our mission, since we planned this church several years ago, was to reach out to people who don't have a church family to be a part of. And even, I guess, our vision even more direct than that, when we planted this church almost 14 years ago, by the way, for those of y'all who have been with us since the beginning, it's been almost 14 years now. Next month will be our 14th. Did you call it anniversary or birthday? I don't know which one it is, both. But we've been around for almost 14 years. But when we planted this church, one of the things that we talked about was how we did not want to be just another, cookie cutter or just typical, Church of Christ, just another Church of Christ church to go to. That we really wanted to target and look for and reach out to unchurched people, okay? And so we're defining unchurched people, and you'll see that at the top of the sheet that I gave you. We're defining unchurched people as people who either have never been a part of a church family before, have never had faith in Jesus before, and or used to be a part of a church at one time, but they've stopped going and really haven't thought about being a part of a church again. That's our definition of unchurched people, and that's who we want to focus on. Now, I guess about a year ago, we challenged this church to really focus on inviting more people. We want to see this church grow. We gave a challenge to see if we could, just even on Sunday mornings, if we could have twice as many people here in this room worshiping together by the year 2026. not so that we can pat ourselves on the back and go, look at us, we doubled in size, look how many people we have now, but because it is a testimony to us actually making connections with people who don't have a church family and who have needs, and we're reaching out to them, and we're allowing them to experience this awesome church family we're a part of. So, trying to set the stage for what it is that we're talking about. Last fall, Brandon became aware of a, what would you call it, training? Or at least informational online conference?
Yes, online conference, I guess.
Yes. About sharing Jesus and about what some churches are doing to do, to be more proactive in sharing Jesus and connecting with people, with unchurched people in their communities. And specifically, this was from the Barna Research Group. And so some of y'all may recognize that name. Some of y'all may have never heard of them before. But as far as just research into culture and into church culture and into how those two are interacting or not interacting, Barna Research Group does a ton of just surveys and data collecting inside and outside of churches to kind of let us know where culture is and where churches are right now in comparison to their culture. So a lot of the information that we're going to share with you comes from the Barna Research Group, but they kind of led us through just like, here's the pulse of, I mean, not even worldwide, just America. This is kind of what Americans in general feel about God and about church, and especially those who are unchurched, especially those who don't have faith and don't have a church family to be a part of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we went through about 6 weeks of that for 2 hours a week, which was cool. And it was like information overload, all of these PowerPoints and stuff and graphs and those kinds of things. And so Marshall and I asked the leadership if we wanted to get together on a weekend to just talk about all of this stuff. And so we just mulled over these things, prayed over these findings. And the biggest part was, how does this connect with Flagstone? So where does Flagstone fit in with this research group called it Sharing Jesus instead of Evangelism. And we're going to talk about this, I think, a little bit more next week. But I think many of us, if you've grown up in the church and you think of, I need to go evangelize, or, I need to take an evangelism class or learn about evangelism, there can be like, whoa, like I don't
It's
know.
intimidating.
Yeah, how do I do that? And then it's like, hello, have you heard about our Lord and Savior? Like, what's the protocol for how do you actually do this? And so they offered some really, really good insights, and we talked with our leadership, and our leadership was able to get together and really come together and figure out, what do some of those next steps looks like. And so an insights class about that was one of those strategies for how can we equip ourselves and the family to be able to go out to actually reach out, connect, and serve.
Yeah, so we've even gone over this information that we're going to share with you guys over the next couple of weeks. We went over it with our leadership ahead of time, and all of our leadership. We talked through it. We talked about some things like, I don't even know if that applies to us or not, or wow, I didn't realize, but that probably does apply to us. And just kind of, it's some eye-opening information, and also just acknowledging like this is something that we want our entire church family, not just our leadership and not just our staff, our entire church family to have a heart for, and seeing the opportunities to share Jesus with somebody else, and seeing the opportunities to at least invite somebody else to come be a part of the church family we're a part of, and then actually taking the initiative to do that. So that's what this class is all about. So first question that I want to ask you guys, and it's there on your sheets too, but this is going to be a little bit difficult in this kind of format to do. So I'm going to borrow a technique from my wife, Christy, and I'm going to have you guys choose a talking partner, which is either the person sitting next to you or in front of or behind you. It can be 3, but let's not make it 15. Just like 1 or 2 people around you. And just this first question, I want y'all to talk with each other, give you a couple minutes to kind of talk with each other, and now I want to hear your responses, what you came up with. So the first question, what character traits, at least for you, define unchurched people? Like what when you're defining an unchurched person, what does that look like in your mind? And then the second part of that question is like, how do you think those unchurched people or non-believers or whatever term you want to use, what do you think that they think about us and about church and about Christianity? Okay? Just what do you honestly think that they think? Forget the stats that we're going to go over down below. Just what's your opinion? How do you picture them? What are their character traits? And then what do you think that they think of us? All right? On your mark, you say go. Just talk with somebody near you, please. Okay. I want to hear, there was a lot of talk in there. I'm not sure if it was all about the topic, so that's all right. But what did you guys talk about? And if you don't want to say what the person that you were talking to said. Throw them under the bus. Anybody? And we'll try to repeat into the mic because we're going to record all these classes. We'll try to repeat back into the mic what it is that you guys say. Yes, sir, go ahead. Unchurched people are people who have been hurt by Christians or by the church. Okay, good. Anybody else? Okay, so kind of like two different categories. One group would be the group that at some point went to church and just don't anymore. Maybe they were hurt by the church or some other reason. And then people who had never been a part of the church in the first place. And we kind of put them all under the same umbrella, but it is a little bit two different groups. Yes, ma'am? Yeah. Okay. So used to think that unchurched was people who just didn't go to a church building, but they might have had some kind of faith. They might have had some kind of belief. But starting to recognize now that maybe that applies more to people who, even if they wanted to have a belief, they don't know how to, or they just don't want to. One of the two. Good. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am. Don't want to listen to a preacher just jabber. Yeah, she said that to me. Yeah.
This class got real really quick.
I guess we're being honest. But the rest of what you said was there's people who may not even be opposed to church. They just don't want to take the time to be a part of it. Yeah, that's their day off. They got other priorities. Good. Anybody else? Yeah, there's some people who it's not even being anti. It's just never even considered it. Never considered faith. Never considered church. Never thought about being a part of it. I saw a hand. David. Okay, so people who don't attend, but they also fall out of the reach of our comfort zone. Yeah, they're a little too far for me to reach and stay in my my comfortable bubble.
We're going to talk about that a little bit because that's scary.
Yeah. So we got a lot of different, perspectives and definitions of unbelievers and unchurched people, right? And I don't disagree with any of your descriptions of them. I think those are all different character traits of them. What did you say, if anything, did you say anything about how you think that unchurched people probably feel about church people? I would imagine that people who have been hurt by the church, they don't like church people. And as soon as you say, yeah, I go to church, I'm a Christian, it's an immediate barrier that's been put up between you. Anybody else? What do y'all think? Yes, sir. Confused because why? Right. There's so much effort put into it, and it is my day off, and why would I? That's confusing. Why would y'all do that? They're confused by us. Why we would take the time to get together with the church and talk about guilt and shame and all those kinds of things. Yes, sir. So they see church people as hypocrites. Mm-hmm. And I appreciate what Dave said about his response to him. My response over the years when people have said, church is full of a bunch of hypocrites, I'm like, you're exactly right. I mean, we are, myself included. I'm not fully consistent with everything that I even preach about. But that's the difference, is I have something to help take care of my flaws and when I fall short. And I try to do better, but I'm not going to be perfect at it. Yes, ma'am. Oh, Westboro. This is in Kansas, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. You see the extremes on social media and stuff like that, and that becomes your perception of all churches. They all must be this way. Yeah. Because then, like you said, you can't even initiate a conversation because they've already made up their minds that is what you are. Mm-hmm. Good. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. It's a discipline, yeah, and I'd rather not be disciplined. Yes, sir.
Intolerant. We are 100% correct, and if you're not even close to that, sorry, just push away.
Yeah, but to use your word angry, there's so much to be angry about, and church just becomes one of them, especially if you're not a part of one. I think I saw another hand up over here. Judgment. They think that people who are in church are judgmental of people who are not. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. For the purposes of this class, the question was, do we consider people with other religious faiths, such as Hinduism or Islam or something like that, as unchurched people? For the purposes of this class, yes, because we're talking about specifically a church like Christian church. So it's a good question. Thank you for clarifying. And that's part of the issue as well, is maybe they've already got another religious faith to be a part of, so they wouldn't consider, doing something different. Yeah. So, I think we have kind of at least a little bit of a clear perception, of unchurched, unchristian church people, and how they feel about us. But we want to get a little bit better understanding even of just our own culture. And so I want to go through some of these statistics, and we're going to have some slides up on the screen as well. So you can, these classes are going to be recorded, and we're going to have them on our website later, but you can screenshot anything that you want to, or ask for clarification on some of this stuff. But we want to go through some of these different character traits there were some of them like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And then there's some like, oh, I didn't realize that, okay? So, but we'll go through them kind of as quickly as possible. But if you got a question, need some clarification, please, raise your hand, or if I'm not watching, shout out, whatever.
As we're walking through this, I would challenge each of us to, these are all statistics, but these are all statistics of real life people. Mm-hmm. And not only that, these are all statistics of people that for many of us, people that we work with, people that are a part of our lives or in our circles or on our teams. And so at least for me, as we're walking through this, for me to picture some people, and I can think of a handful right now of this could be what my friend thinks. This could be what my family member thinks. That really helps us to move from the 30,000 feet to the person that sits across from me. Because if this is our mission and we're understanding who our mission is, it makes it a lot more clear and fans to flame, I think, the spirit of like, man, this is why this matters.
Yeah. And also, just to give a little bit of a caveat, when we were talking about this with our shepherds, one of the questions that came up that I thought was a very insightful question is, okay, these are national statistics. How does this compare to just here in Northwest Arkansas? And so there's a little bit of I guess take even the information that we're sharing with you with a little bit of a grain of salt, because as far as the de-churching of America, the unchurched culture, I guess if you want to call it that, we're here in the Bible Belt, and we're here in a fairly conservative state and a fairly conservative part of a conservative state. So there are a lot of churched people. Go drive down the highway. How many churches did you pass on the way to this building this morning, right? So there's part of it that causes us to go, well, I don't know if this really applies to us. But I want us to have the mindset that Brandon was just talking about, like, let's have open eyes to recognize that there's somebody in not just in our community, but in our workplaces, maybe in our neighborhoods, that fall into these categories. The statistics are too high for it just to apply to the rest of the country and not to us. Does that make sense? So, for example, the first one there, 67% of adults in the U.S. self-identify as Christians. So they say, I am a Christian, okay? So I tried to figure out, okay, well, is there anything out there, I'm just doing Google searches and stuff like that. Is there anything out there that would, just for the state of Arkansas, would, give us a clear insight in just our state, not even the whole country, just our state? And the closest that I found was Pew Research did a survey, and the most recent one that I could find was 2014, so 10 years ago. And it said that 79% of people in Arkansas said that they believe in God. So that's the closest that I could find, okay? So pretty close to, a little bit higher percentage as far as just believing in God. Now, does that mean they go to church? Not necessarily, but that's also 10 years ago too. So even with this statistic that we have up here, you see this line graph of the percentage of U.S. adults who self-identify, who, if I say, are you a Christian, they say, yes, I am, is 67%, so 2/3 of our country. So still above 50%, okay? But one thing that I want to point out to you that's not on the screen is that 20 years ago, so in 2004, that number was 81%. So in the last 20 years, we've gone from 81% of our country to 67% of our country saying, yeah, I'm a Christian. That's a significant drop in 20 years' time.
It's trending downwards, too.
Yeah.
And I think it's on the next slide. The largest group of that actually is Gen Z right there. 25% of all Gen Zs say that they are, oh, I guess it's more than that. Only 56, that's better. Only 56 identify as Christian.
Yeah, and so Gen Z, in case you don't know all the different generations, Gen Z would be your college age.
And younger.
Yeah, young adult, fresh out of college age, somewhere around in that group. Okay. So going on to the next one on the handout that we gave you there. 20% of U.S. adults are practicing their Christian faith. Now, this goes back to something that somebody said a minute ago about whether they actually go to church or just identify themselves as Christians. So 67% say, yeah, I'm a Christian, but 20% are practicing, and we gave you a definition there of what Barna was calling practicing Christian, okay? A practicing Christian means that the person self-identifies as a Christian, attends church monthly, at least once a month.
Not weekly.
Not weekly, monthly, and agrees strongly that their religious faith is very important in their life. So whoever says yes to those three categories is who this group identifies as a practicing Christian. They are practicing their faith. They're practicing Christianity, okay? And only 20% of U.S. adults are doing that. So it just kind of muddies the water a little bit, because we may be thinking to ourselves, well, that's an unchurched person. And according to, like, if we're talking about do they actually come to church on a regular basis and their faith is very important to them, they may be unchurched. They may not be practicing. But if you talk to them about it, they may say, oh, yeah, I got faith. I believe in God. I'm totally a Christian, even though maybe some of us wouldn't define them that way, you know? So we have to kind of have at least some awareness of that. But even with that particular statistic, again, 20 years ago, it was 39, almost 40% of Americans were practicing Christians. So we've gone in 20 years from 40% of the country coming to church at least once a month, identifying as Christians, saying that their faith is important to them, to now we're down to 20%. That has to be happening in our community as well here in Northwest Arkansas. That's not just them out there. That has to be happening here too.
Yeah, the trend is that America is becoming less and less Christian, which I think if we look at our culture at large, we're like, yes, I see that. That's okay. Not that that's okay, but I see that. And so if this is the track that we're on, and so that should light a fire, at least in us a little bit too, of like, well, what's it gonna look like in 20 years from now?
Yeah.
This is our mission. This is our job.
Our chance to change the trend. That's exactly right. So the next one, about half, so 45% of U.S. adults who identify as having no faith. So this is just people who like, I don't have any faith. So going back to your question a minute ago, Ruth, this is people that aren't a part of another religious group either. They just have no faith whatsoever. They once considered themselves to be a Christian at some point in their lives. And that was interesting to me, that of all the people who say, I don't believe in anything, I'm not a part of Christianity, I'm not a part of Islam, I'm not a part of anything else, at almost half of them, so 45% of them, at one point considered themselves to be a Christian. Not like we had a questionnaire and like, were you actually a Christian? But they considered themselves to be Christian at one point, okay? Which, you know, when we were talking about these character traits of unchurched people, I don't know if that's one of the things we thought of was like, well, they used to be Christian.
Yeah. No, I'm just pointing out like that's what Darren said of like they used to be, but they're not anymore. Mm-hmm. They grew up with mom and dad, but they decided to walk away from it.
So a few more things about that. 63% of U.S. adults who do not practice, now this is just Christianity, who do not practice Christianity today, were raised in a Christian family. So what does that tell you about our culture? Well, I don't want to. He said parents didn't do a good job. We're getting real in this class, but and that might be the case. But at least there's been some exposure in their lives, and for whatever reason, they left Christianity, they left the church. 74% of U.S. adults overall say that they were raised in a Christian household. So this is Christian, non-Christian, just 3/4 of our country says, I was raised in a Christian household. Whatever their definition of Christian household is, they say that they were raised in a Christian household. And then, okay, so the reason that we point those things out to you is for us to understand that, like, a lot of the folks that may not be a part of a church, a lot of the folks that don't have any faith or have walked away from their faith have probably had at least some exposure to Christianity, positive or negative. They've had some exposure to it, which, and we'll talk about this more in a couple weeks, that gives us at least a little bit of common ground.
It's kind of a mixed bag too, because if you're like me and you're like, oh, they know a little bit, or they were a Christian at some point, or they know a little bit about Jesus and Christianity, it's a mixed bag, because it's like, okay, well, we can have some common ground. You used to go to church, me too. But then it's also, you used to go to church and you left because of this, or you don't agree with this. It's like, whoo. Right off the bat, it can be like, well, I don't even know where to start the conversation, because the conversation begins in a minefield.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so just to give you guys a little bit more, just about even their mindset. Man, it's hard. Like, I'm interrupting myself. I apologize. But even saying like them and they and their is awkward for me, because it does sound like a little bit judgmental, like those people over there. And I don't mean it that way, but I just assume that most of us in this room, maybe not all of us, but most of us have faith, and we go to church, and our faith is important to us. And so just to make the distinction between the people who have that kind of relationship with the church family and those who don't. I'm not trying to be judgmental when I say they and them. Okay? I just want to be clear on that. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Probably even more so than the generations before you. So really good insights. I'm just going to kind of summarize all that the best I can. As we're talking about people who have left the church, who may have grown up in a Christian household and grown up going to church, especially for millennials and Gen Z, coming into adulthood, they find themselves surrounded by, in the workplace and their friendships and stuff, surrounded by people who at least come across as less judgmental, and are more critical of institutions like a church that seems more judgmental. And why don't you connect with us and build relationships with us instead of those people that obviously don't think that you're good enough? And it becomes a common trend. And you add the element, you mentioned Facebook, you add the element of social media to that, where you can find reinforcement anywhere that you want to find it, in your social media feed. It adds to that. And I think that's why you see a whole lot more of our 40 and younger folks really walking away almost in droves from their faith.
Yeah, it's tough.
There's nothing for them. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's. I don't want to belabor this point this morning, but there is some thought, just an awareness that I think youth ministers are becoming more aware of spending all of our teenagers' time with just activities and stuff that are good things and make kids feel like they're a part of something, but almost to the point where they're almost starved of it. When they get out of high school, and we got to have an awareness of that. Let's go quickly because I don't want to run out of time. Let's keep moving down the page a little bit. So 35% of Americans, this is all Americans, 35% believe that moral truth is absolute. In other words, there's only 35% of our country that says there are definite definitions of right and wrong. That's significant. So basically 2/3 of the adults in our country say moral truth, right and wrong, it's kind of fluid, and it changes. And whatever's good for me may not be good for you, and whatever's good for you may not be good for me, and we're okay with that. And there are no definitive, absolute rights and wrongs.
Yeah, I hear it all the time and see it all the time with the teenagers and everything. Not these ones. I love y'all. Not these ones over here and stuff too. But it's just, that's the cardinal sin in our culture, is to say you're wrong. To point out somebody else's opinion or what somebody else's believe as their truth, and to say that you're wrong, that's a one-way ticket to being canceled, And so 2/3 of our culture believes, everything is permissible for me. It's fine. I can do whatever I want, and you can't define what that is for me.
So this is where we're talking about, like, how do we have conversations? We're going to start talking about that in the next couple of weeks, how we have conversations with those folks. Well, understand that you're probably talking to somebody who doesn't see absolute truth. And how do we initiate that conversation? How do we find even something common ground? If we do recognize there are some absolutes, there's a gray area too, but there are some absolutes, and this person doesn't, that's a hard place to find some kind of connection. Yes, sir? Yeah, it is. You're right. There's always been a struggle to find a tendency for people to define their own truth.
That's humanity. That's sin, man. That's the very first thing.
Right. That's what Jesus prayed for, was being in the world but not of the world. But we have to be making those kinds of connections. So let's talk real quick about what unchurched people think about the church. Okay. Let's see. Non-Christian adults describe their local churches. Okay, so they don't go to church, but this is how they perceive churches in their local communities. Okay, these are their top 3 descriptive terms of the churches in their communities. It's irrelevant to me. They're judgmental. They're hypocritical. What have we already talked about? Mm-hmm. We've already brought that up. That's the perception of people. So the top 3 ways that unchurched people in general view the church, I guess, as an institution, or the church in their local communities, no matter what the denomination is. They're irrelevant. They don't have anything to speak into my life. They're judgmental. They're going to tell me that I'm wrong, and they're going to tell me all the reasons I'm wrong, and they're going to make me feel bad about it. And they're hypocritical. They say things that they don't actually do. So that's the perception that a lot of folks in our community have.
And then you have to grapple with the fact of, or the opinion of, are they right?
Yeah, you have to ask that. So U.S. millennials ages 28 to 43 who have dropped out of Christianity as adults say so the ones that we talked about that have left the church, they started out maybe raised in a Christian home, maybe having faith, but they left. Here's why. These are the top 3 reasons. The church does not answer my questions. I've got questions about life, about relationships, about things I'm trying to handle, and I can't find answers to that at the church. Second reason, the church cannot answer my questions, which sounds the same, but it's a little bit different. I might think that there might be some answers at church, but they're just not doing a good job of it. Or I might believe I can't find an answer to that at church. Church cannot speak into my life. Or the church does not address my day-to-day life in a useful way. So it's got good stuff to say. It just doesn't. It's not just that it's irrelevant, but it doesn't. There's nothing good for me. It doesn't fit my life. Okay. Many non-Christians say that. Here's the good stuff. Here's some good stuff. They say that they're thinking about spirituality. Right up here on this slide. When asked, it was a survey that they did. And when asked a question, I frequently think about the spiritual side of life. Okay. You got all adults. The middle bar there is people who self-identify as Christians. The bottom one is your non-Christians. And the red is that they agree strongly that I'm thinking about my spirituality. 23%, 28% at least agree somewhat. Okay, so that tells you that almost, at least half of them are at least considering. They're thinking about spirituality. Now, they may not know exactly how to define that. They may be looking for it in Buddhism and Hinduism and all sorts of isms, but at least there's when we were going through these stats a minute ago, it's not that people don't want to have spiritual conversations. They are interested in it, okay? And so for us to kind of assume people don't care about that, people don't care about church, and they don't care about spiritual stuff. No, actually they do. At least a lot of them do.
At least 70% is the next thing.
Yes,
at least 70% of
non-Christians think that there's at least a spiritual or supernatural dimension. They think there's something outside of our physical world. They don't know how to define it. They don't know exactly what it is. They may not believe what I believe it is, but they think there's something. And that's significant. The 7 out of 10 of them think, okay, there's something out there. And if we can have a conversation with them, like, yeah, there is, and let me tell you what I think that is. That's a great launching off point, to have those conversations, okay? Now, what about having conversations with Christians? What about sharing our faith and at least initiating those conversations? I want to make sure we get to this. Man, we got to wrap up. But I want to make sure we get this morning, okay? So everybody, just look at these numbers. When asked for the characteristics of someone that they would talk to about faith, here's what non-Christians said. So just to clarify that, non-Christians were surveyed and said, if somebody wanted to have a conversation about their faith with you, what kind of character traits would you want that person to exhibit? Does that make sense? So look at and this isn't the whole list, Let's give you a few of their top ones, okay? Listens without judgment. That was their number one. Listen to me, but don't judge me, okay? Listens without judgment. Does not force a conclusion. For at least the 50s and 60s and probably the decades after that, what was our method of evangelism? You knock on somebody's door, you show them a Jewel Miller film strip, and you say, you got to make a decision. You want to be baptized or you want to go to hell? That's your two choices, right? And that was our spiritual conversations for a long time. Maybe for some of us it still is, okay? Unchristian people, unchurched people value the conversation without being forced to make a conclusion, at least immediately. Now, obviously, there has to be at some point where they make a choice, make a decision, but they don't want to feel forced into that. Okay, and then allow others, similar to this, allow others to draw their own conclusions. Let me have the conversation, and I'll start figuring out what I think about that. All right, and then the last thing. This is the least favorite thing or the least characteristic that they want in somebody that they're talking about their faith with. Has all the answers to questions about faith. Now, that's significant for a couple of reasons. One, they don't want for somebody to tell them all the different things that they need to know. They want a conversation so that they can kind of grow to those conclusions themselves. But also, we will definitely talk about this next week. What is one of the reasons that we struggle with having spiritual conversations? What are we afraid of? Not knowing the answers. They're going to ask me a question and I don't know the answer to it. Look at what non-Christians are saying. That's the least important thing to them. You don't have to have all the answers. Let's just talk. Well, let's maybe find some answers together.
In fact, honesty is more valued than anything else.
For sure.
For you to say, you know what? I don't know.
Yeah.
And I actually struggle with that too. Ooh, that's
Yeah.
the kicker.
Okay, so we got what they're looking for, right? Now, here's what they have actually experienced. When asked if Christians that they know actually do these things, these same character traits, okay? Listens without judgment, only 34%. So 2/3 of them, or not 60% of them, 62% of them say, I want to have a conversation with a Christian who's not going to judge me. But only 1/3 of them actually have experienced that. That's too big a gap. That's significant, okay? Does not force a conclusion, 26%. Allows others to draw their own conclusions, 22%. I want you to see like what they want and what they're actually experiencing are not the same. And we want to do a better job of that. And we want to equip our church family to do a better job of having the willingness to have spiritual conversations, but also do that in a positive way. Okay, so we're out of time. The thought question, just take that with you, chew on that this week, and we'll maybe start out class next week with just, hey, the things that we share with you, what were some things that either stood out to you or surprised you or whatever. But I do want to end with this. We have our mission statement up at the top of the page, but Matthew chapter 28, do you still have it on your thing? Matthew chapter 28, what we call the Great Commission, the mission that Jesus gave us. Go ahead. You can read it.
It says, and Jesus came to them, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. So go, therefore, and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always to the end of the age.
Yeah. And the one thing about that, it's probably a familiar verse to a lot of us, but Jesus doesn't say, hey, you should think about going in and making disciples. You should mull that over. What does he say?
Go
do it. And so we want to, that's what this class is about. And when we get into some of our information next week, we're going to start giving you some tools to help with this so that you can have some confidence. And so hopefully it'll spark a desire to go share your faith with other people. Anything else you want to say before we quit?
Yeah, just last thing. We opened up with trying to think of somebody that you might have in your workplace. And so I challenge you, as we're going through these next 4 weeks or so, make a list. If you know multiple people, just have 3 people that you either write down their names or you have them, imprinted on your forehead or something like that. 3 people that you know are unchurched, and be thinking about them this week and be thinking about them for the weeks to come. And if you don't know anybody, know that, okay, I gotcha. Pray for eyes to see. Because if you're like me, Marshall and I would talk to Christian people all day long, and if we wanted to, we could have no contact with any unchristians.
We can stay in our bubble.
Yeah.
Easily.
And so think of 3 people that might fall into these categories, or pray for eyes to see. Because, man, let me tell you, Jesus didn't put us on this mission to go, therefore, and make disciples without a mission to be done. He wouldn't give us the mission if we don't actually have a mission around us.
Yeah. Thank you guys for your time. We'll do it again next week, okay? Hope you'll come back. We got more information to share with you next week.
Grab some coffee.